what Russia could lose economically in this war. Since the war has been lasting for 3 weeks, what we can see is both sides were stuck. I never mean there's no change on the battlefield, but what I found is no matter Russia or Ukraine side, they both have not too much breakthrough, like what we observed in the first week. As we know, in the first week, Russian troops advanced hundreds of miles and the Ukrainian government have to give up from their major cities like Kherson and Kharkiv, and millions of Ukrainian people became refugees overnight. However, something was going weird as the negotiation began in the second week. For Ukraine sides, from their government, their president to minister, no one shows fears or willingness to surrender. And meanwhile, Russia didn't achieve what they expected at the very beginning, like secretly assassinating Zelensky or declaring a rapid military coup, controlling capital like what they did in Prague, the capital of Czech Republic in 1968. Compared to what happened on the battlefield, things in financial market is more bizarre, because we're witnessing the biggest sanction since the end of the Cold War. Well, someone might get a question like, is there any bigger sanction happening before? Sure, because the Cold War is the largest sanction for the Western world, and the communist world both cut almost any relationship. In those days, you cannot get a MacBook manufactured in China or drink Coke when you live in the Soviet Union. Honestly, no one wants to go back to that kind of a life anymore. But unfortunately, we do experience that kind of a life which happened before. At least, Russian people can feel that. But here, I want to mention that this sanction is a little bit different from what we saw from government announcement or the mainstream media. Like Nike, Apple, Zara, all these brands have declared quitting the Russian market. It sounds like Russian people finally have to go back to old school lifestyle, right? Actually, like many global brands from Japan, China, or Korea, they currently have no plan to sanction or quit the market. And here we can see the brands which have clearly announced their boycott plan, and it's just a small sample of all the global brands. By the way, we gotta switch our focus more on sanctions from technology brands like Apple or Intel, because compared to daily consumer brands, it is not that easy to find a substitute for Russian in a very short time, even if they can get some support from China. So at least we cannot simply say the relationship between Russia and the Western world will quickly go back to the middle of 20th century. And the main action is cutting Russia from the global financial system, which began from the SWIFT system. But here, we need to make it clear that the SWIFT system is more about information exchange, and Russian banks, whose major business is about energy, is out of the sanction list. And the US government just announced sanctioning 7 Russian banks. It's like at the moment, the market still have a positive view on the further situation, but in fact, things went terrible further. In fact, the war happened in the financial market is more drama. On February the 24th, the first day of the war, Russian stock market dropped nearly half, but rebounded 26% in the next day. Since then, Russian government closed their stock market with more than $200 billion loss, almost like evaporating AT&T overnight. And meanwhile, the Russian currency exchange rate dropped almost 10%. So, for Russian top leaders, the reaction from the financial market is much bigger than they expected. But what comes next is the real financial nuclear bomb, all-out financial war. That's what the West declared to Russia. Just after the declaration of sanction, the Russian exchange rate rapidly dropped and lost more than 30%. And meanwhile, The stock from Russian major energy companies in London, in the US, and Europe were almost all zeroed out, which means Russia lost its money overseas. For example, in London stock market, the market price of the Russian Federal Reserve Bank decreased from $4 to 1 cent just in one day with 95% loss. And we gotta know, this stock was once one of the biggest blue chip stock, which represents security and high quality. Well, it sounds like you saved dozens of money, but all your money in overseas bank or stock market just disappear in very short time. Similar things also happened to Rosneft, the biggest Russian oil company, losing 92% of its stock value, despite the Russian government doing some preparation before the sanction, like hugely raising their gold and euro reserve. It still hit them much worse than they expected. So swift operation is just the beginning, and it looks more like a signal, which means the start of all-out sanction from the Western world covering every place of the Russian economy. From March the 4th, most of global credit rating companies put Russian financial credit to the trash level, and it means most of the investors will sell Russian company stock and state bonds quickly. Of course, these investors, which mostly are global financial giants, will lose much of money, but that's what they must do because they gotta follow the order from the government regulators. For example, BP Oil got pressure from the British government to sell their 20% share of Rosneft company, which could cause billions of dollar loss. And Norway government acquired its government pension fund, providing a withdrawal plan from the Russian energy company before the middle of March. So please don't see the top 1% of people decide everything. Government is in charge. And moreover, something much more terrible is that Russia lost its most bank assets. Like Russia, the Federal Reserve Bank was forbidden its business operation in Europe, Japan, and the United States, from frozen its assets to limited daily business. Russia got a huge volume of foreign exchange reserve before February 24th. However, nearly 40% was in Western world. So the actual assets Russia can use is just 35%, including gold, foreign currency, and commodity. So in finance part, Russia literally is much weaker than what they imagined. And based on the interview of a Russian finance minister, Russia have lost more than $500 billion up to now, which is half of their international reserve. So is there any way for Russia to get out of the dilemma? I guess no good solution, except ceasing their military operation and get a negotiation with Ukraine and the West immediately. The truth is, last year, Russia has brought back much foreign paper money, but the large scale of bank run is much worse than they thought after the Western sanction. Another action is to use crypto, but unluckily, the United States government has just announced their further regulation on crypto area, preventing Russia from evading sanctions. Well, some of you guys might wonder, is there any partner like China who may give any support to Russia? Well, basically, the support from China or India or the Arabian world is not enough for making up Russia's huge loss. Because from finance to trade, the exchange volume between Russia and the Western world is much more than half of the Russian economy. Unfortunately, Russia's trade with China is just 18% of its total volume, despite China being their number one trade partner for years. And dramatically, their trade volume just increased 1% every year since 2016, which shows their relationship is not as fantastic as the outside imagine. By the way, Russia has been doing export substitute strategy for years since the 2014 Crimea crisis, but they just haven't recovered 70% of pre-sanctions trade volume. So it is so clear Russia performed very passively and embarrassing in this war. And maybe that's why they were more willing to negotiate with Ukraine and the European Union just in the second week. So let's just go back to our topic. What could Russia lose economically in this war? Well, I can see they will lose their last chance to prosperity again. The truth is, after Crimea crisis, Russia got a huge economic prosperity for global energy price growth and meanwhile strengthened their energy cooperation with Western Europe. But this war broke everything. At least in the next 5 to 10 years, Russia and Western Europe will barely have a chance to trust each other, from finance to energy, and Russia gonna lose its major export market. Maybe Russia can finally take some of the Ukrainian lands as what they claim neutral security area. But what do we have to know? Even if Russia take the whole of Ukraine, it will be a huge burden for its weak economy and seriously drag down Russia's economic growth. So that could be the price they have to pay. And the damage from the market is definitely bigger than what Russia felt on the battlefield. Finally, we cannot forget as one of the biggest energy export giant, which basically provides more than 25% of energy globally. Sanction on Russia will finally affect the worldwide supply chain. So in the end, it is not just going to be global inflation, but another Great Depression if the war could not cease in half of the year. And that's the real test for all the people around the world.